In this forecast, large amounts of rainfall will lead to the possibility of significant flash flooding in the Arklatex region. Across coastal Texas to Louisiana, isolated thunderstorms could produce a weak tornado, as well as damaging wind gusts and small to medium hail. Everything you need to know on Project Gladiator. Hello everyone and welcome back to another Project Gladiator weather forecast. Hope everyone is having an amazing Tuesday. Today I'll be covering the weather for January 23rd of 2024. This isn't going to be your typical forecast where I make things a little bit more simpler for you to understand, like the weekly overlook or the Wednesday update. I will be going quite in depth on a lot of the weather that we are expected to see across the United States this week, or sorry, for today. But if you are interested in that sort of thing, please feel free to stick around until the end of the video. I will also be going over the severe weather risk that is going to be possible across some of the more coastal regions of Texas into Louisiana. But starting off with our excessive rainfall forecast, this is going to be the primary thing that we're going to be going over in today's video. We do have a moderate threat for a lot of the Arklatex region for eastern Texas into northern Louisiana and southern Arkansas, right around the Arklatex region, meaning that we do have at least a 40% chance for flooding across this region. Basically what that means is that we are expected to see some widespread flooding across this region, with some regions that may be able to see significant flooding with a lot of the rainfall accumulation. And then we also do have another marginal threat for southern Arizona, where we could see some isolated flash flooding. Something I do want to mention is that for tomorrow, we also do have another moderate threat, but this is going to be pushed a little bit more to the eastward regions of the southeast, where we do have a moderate threat extending from Louisiana across central Mississippi into northern Alabama, with a slight risk that is going to be extending into southern Kentucky. So we are expected to see that continue into tomorrow as well. So if you do live in any of the affected areas, please stay weather alert for the time being, as some flash flooding may potentially be significant. Hopping over to our radar omega model so we can take a look at how much rainfall we are actually expected to see accumulate across this region. Again, mainly focusing on the moderate threat area for flash flooding. You can already see that we do have quite a bit of flash flooding or flooded warnings across this region. For a very good portion of a lot of the Arklatex region due to all this flash flooding. Main reason that we are expected to see all this flash flooding is because of the broad trough that is situated across this region, that is expected to stay pretty stationary. So the front that is expected to be associated with this trough is expected to be stationary as well, because the cold air advection won't really be moving anywhere. It's kind of just going to be staying put. So this stationary front is kind of just going to sit here and develop a ton of rainfall along its boundary, and that's the primary reason that we are expected to see the risk for flash flooding, is because that stationary front is expected to stay there. It may move a little bit more towards the east by tomorrow, but overall it is expected to kind of just sit here over the next couple of hours and lead to a ton of rainfall. You can see models are indicating the possibility of rainfall totals that could potentially be getting upwards of 5 inches. Earlier it was saying 6 inches. However, the models have decreased a little bit, but overall I would say that the overall expected amount of rainfall that we should see for this region is expected to be around 5 to 6 inches by the end of or by the start of tomorrow. So again, we are expected to see a absolute insane amount of rainfall across this region, and all that should definitely accumulate in low-lying areas and definitely saturate the ground quite a lot, and potentially make roads hazardous, as well as again accumulate in low-lying areas and potentially rise quite high, making some areas potentially dangerous to travel through. Hopping back over to the SPC website really quickly so we can take a look at the risk for severe thunderstorms across coastal regions of Texas into Louisiana. Currently, we do have a marginal threat for the regions expected to see the possibility of some isolated severe thunderstorms. The risk for these severe thunderstorms do include the possibility of of 1 or 2 brief tornadoes across this region. Overall, tornado risk is expected to be fairly low, but still there with that 2% tornado risk. As for damaging wind gusts, we do have a 5% wind threat for a lot of the marginal threat area, meaning that we could see the possibility of some isolated damaging wind gusts with some of our storms. And then for hail, we do have a 5% hail risk for a lot of the region, indicating that we may have the possibility of some small to medium hail in some isolated regions with some of these storms. Taking a look at our composite reflectivity really quickly, I'm going to be going over the when and where you should be able to see our severe thunderstorms across this region. The main reason why I didn't really go over the timing for the rain showers that we are expected to see, leading to the possibility of flash flooding, some of which may be significant across the Arklatex region, is because that rainfall is expected to be almost non-stop across that region. So there wasn't really a starting or stopping point for it that I could really note down. But I can go over the timing for our severe thunderstorms in the marginal threat area. We are expected to see this warm front push northward, and that will lead to the possibility of our severe thunderstorms. That's going to be the main triggering factor for our severe thunderstorms. We are expected to see a lot of lingering rain showers across this region before our severe thunderstorms, but you can see around 4 p.m. We should be able to see that that warm front push up to around the Houston region and develop a lot of those more isolated, more robust cells. Some of them may potentially get quite robust with a lot of the instability that we may have across this region, and those are the main cells that we are expected to be looking out for as far as our severe thunderstorm risk is going to be those isolated severe thunderstorms along the warm front. And those severe thunderstorms are expected to kind of clump together as they push into more northern regions just to the north of Houston around 8 p.m. into that moderate threat area for flash flooding, and then they should move into northern Louisiana around 1 a.m. tomorrow as overall weaker storms that shouldn't really do all that much. Taking a look at our 500 millibars so we could get an idea of our upper level maps, and then we'll go up to our 200 millibars and then down to our 700 millibars, or vice versa. We are expected to see this trough that I mentioned previously on the weekly overlook. This trough is going to be the main supporting factor for a lot of the rain showers as well as severe thunderstorms that we are expected to see across the marginal threat area. This trough is expected to stay pretty stationary, which is overall going to be a fairly limiting factor, and the axis of the trough is fairly neutral, so it may even be a little bit more on the positive side. So overall, the base of the trough and where the majority of the shear is expected to be mostly out of the way. You can see that we do have a little bit of veering in the winds, but it is expected to be mostly zonal, so overall we aren't really expected to have all that much shear associated with the broader trough. You may have a short wave that is going to pass through that is going to be driving the warm front, and that should help with locally enhanced shear, but overall there's not really a prominent short wave that I can really point out right now, so overall shear may be limited with that as well. So overall, shear might be quite a limiting factor, and may overall lead to a fairly lower end tornado risk because we don't really have a lot of shear to support the possibility of tornadoes. But again, there should definitely be some shear in place within the exit region of this trough. Taking a look at our low-level jet at our 700 millibars so we can get an idea of what our shear may be like at our lower levels and how that may help with storms overall. Our low-level jet is expected to be a little bit more so on the weaker side, but it is expected to be there and should help with storms, even if it is going to be a little bit more on the weaker side. We are expected to see our low-level jet in 700 millibar wind gusts that are going to be getting upwards of 40 miles per hour, which is, again, on the weaker end. We don't really like to see low-level jet that's going to be sub 50 miles per hour. So overall, this is a fairly weak low-level jet. It isn't really going to help too much with shear, but it is there and it may help a little bit, but overall it's not looking as quite good for our 700 millibars. And it isn't really expected to increase with time because of the movement of our trough being almost stationary, plus there's not really a notable shortwave trough that I can really point out, even though there may be one leading to that warm front and our surface low, but overall our low level jet's not looking the greatest. Taking a look at our 200 millibars at our upper level, what we are looking for is the spreading of our isobars to look something like this, where we have them spread out in the exit region of the trough. And overall, what that does is that does create a little bit of a void between the spreading out of the isobars, and because the atmosphere is a gas and it doesn't like voids, it will try to fill that gas and achieve equilibrium. So what it will do is it will take air from the lower levels and the mid levels, and it will rise upward to fill the gap in the upper levels, and that's how you get widespread lift. However, Overall, it doesn't really look like we are having that across a lot of the Texas region. There may be a very small amount of defluence in a lot of this area. It does look like it may be very, very minimal, but overall it is expected to be mostly zonal, and overall a little bit more of a limiting factor to storms. So we aren't really expected to have that huge upper level assistance from our 200 millibars. But what may help is the fact that our 200 millibars is significantly stronger than our 500 and our 700 millibars, upwards of 100 knots, which should definitely lead to the possibility of some elongated photographs, and lead to the possibility of some small to medium hail across this region, and keep storms relatively organized. Taking a look at our storm relative helicity, overall, we aren't really expected to have a crazy amount of directional shear across this region. It is expected to be there, and it should be ample with whatever instability that we may have. Assuming that we do have ample instability to support the possibility of tornadoes, overall our directional shear is looking a little bit more on the weaker side, with storm relative helicity values are going to be getting upwards of 150 to possibly 250 plus. Overall, it is much more on the weaker side, but should definitely support the possibility for at least a weak tornado or two. Taking a look at our bulk shear, now we're going to be more so focusing on our speed shear side of things and how that is expected to affect our overall organization of storms, as well as the possibility of hail across this region. So we are expected to see some bulk shear across this region, especially with the A that we are seeing in our 200 millibars being significantly stronger than our 500 and our 700 millibars. We are seeing quite a bit of shear across this region, with bulk shear values are going to be potentially getting upwards of 50 to potentially 60 knots, maybe even up to 70 in some regions back towards central Texas, back behind the majority of the storms. That should definitely keep storms quite organized, and separate the updraft and the downdraft, and allow them to be quite strong, depending on instability. But that should also lead to the possibility of hail, as we are expected to see quite a bit of elongated photographs come out of this. Taking a look at our dew points, I'm now going to be going over the more of the dynamics of what we are expected to see as far as the overall environment that these storms are expected to be in, instead of the upper air maps. So overall, how much instability we are expected to have, how much moisture, and basically how the environment is expected to affect our storms across this region. We are expected to see quite a bit of warm air advection out of the south, out of the Gulf of Mexico, and that's going to be supplying this region with quite a bit of moisture and quite a bit of instability and heat. And with the dew points that we have, we are seeing some quite ample dew points. Sorry about the call, I will take that in a second, but we are seeing some quite ample dew points, with dew points that are going to be getting upwards of the mid-60s, potentially the upper 60s, which would definitely lead to quite a bit of instability depending on what our temperatures are going to be. Taking a look at our temperatures across this region, combine this with dew points, and we could get the overall idea of what our instability is expected to look like across this region, with the exception of some other models that we are going to be looking at later on in this forecast. But overall, dew points and temperatures are probably one of the biggest things for instability across this region. So taking a look at our temperatures, we are expected to see some fairly warm temperatures across this region. They are a little bit more on the limiting side, which is what we usually see in winter months, with temperatures that are going to be mostly across the 60s, potentially getting into the upper and mid 60s, maybe even into the 70s back behind the warm front. Overall, the warm front is a little bit more hard to see, and it did turn into a stationary front with the most recent scan. But you can see that that increase between temperatures that are going to be in the 60s ahead of the warm front, and temperatures that are going to potentially be getting upwards of the upper 60s and potentially into the 70s back behind the warm front. So overall, we aren't really seeing a sharp temperature gradient with that warm front. So with the overall geometry of the trough supporting the possibility of some semi-discrete cells, plus the overall lack of very strong forcing along this warm front, and a weak temperature gradient, and the fact that it may be overall slow moving because it is turned into a stationary front with this most recent scan. It is definitely supporting a little bit more of a marginal risk because there's not going to be a lot of forcing along that front, but also a little bit more of a discrete mode because there again isn't a lot of forcing along that front to trigger widespread storms along this front. But overall, as far as temperatures go and how it's going to affect our instability, we are seeing some fairly warm temperatures across this region, and it's usually what we like to see for severe weather events in the winter months. And should definitely provide us with quite a bit of ample instability across this region. Taking a look at the lapse rates, we are expected to see overall some somewhat steep lapse rates across the marginal threat region. We would like them to be a little bit higher for severe thunderstorms, and overall maybe a little bit more of a limiting factor to our storms across this region, with lapse rates that are probably going to be around 6. Around 6, probably not going to get up to 7. They're going to be staying mostly in the blue. Overall, not really the best as far as lapse rates, but it is better than no lapse rates. It may help a little bit with instability, but overall shouldn't be a huge aiding factor. It may also help a little bit with the robustity of the updrafts and mixing of the upper and lower layers of the atmosphere, but overall our lapse rates are a little bit more on the weaker side, so probably not going to be a whole lot of aid from it, but again, it is better than nothing, so we may be able to see a little bit of help come out of this. Taking a look at our instability, or our most unstable cape, we are going to culminate everything that we've looked at so far as dew points, temperatures, lapse rates, and the cap to get an idea of what our instability is expected to be like, and then we'll also take a look at our surface instability. We are expected to see quite a bit of instability across this region, quite a bit of cape. We are expected to see cape values are going to be mostly around the upper triple digits to the low, to potentially getting close to the mid 1000s in some regions, which is definitely going to be quite ample for the possibility of severe thunderstorms across this region, and should definitely be able to fuel the risk for at least 1 or 2 brief tornadoes across this region, as well as the potential for some isolated damaging wind gusts and some small to medium hail in some isolated regions. Again, we are expected to see quite a bit of instability across this region, and it should definitely be ample to fuel our storms. Taking a look at our 0 to 3 kilometer instability, or our instability at the surface levels of the atmosphere, and basically our instability at the first 3 kilometers of the atmosphere, basically this is a quite aiding factor in severe thunderstorm setups if we do have strong surface instability. And in certain cold core events, what we mainly look for is the surface instability instead of the most unstable cape, because we can have almost no most unstable cape, but strong surface instability, and that can fuel a couple tornadoes. Don't get me wrong, this isn't a cold core event, and we do have ample most unstable cape, but surface instability can be quite an aiding factor. And surface instability is a little bit more on the weaker end side, but it is there, and it is going to be quite ample for a little bit more of a marginal risk for severe thunderstorms. But overall, our surface instability is looking quite decent, with cape values are potentially going to be getting upwards of the 50s to potentially getting close to potentially close to the 100s, but overall it may be a little bit more on the weaker end. Taking a look at our energy helicity index models, basically what this does is it does combine our instability and our storm relative helicity, hence the name energy helicity index, to give us the idea for what the tornado potential may be like across this region. So taking a look at our energy helicity index models for a lot of this region, overall we are seeing some fairly indicative readings that are going to be a little bit more supportive of a 2% tornado risk, with those more spotty regions that may potentially get upwards of 1.7, 1.5, 1.9, potentially getting close to 2. But overall, these spotty readings are what are most ample for a lower end tornado risk. So overall, we do have quite a bit of instability, quite a bit of shear, and should definitely be able to see the possibility of 1 or 2 brief tornadoes across this region. Taking a look at our wind gust models and what we are expected to see as far as damaging winds with the storms that we may have across this region, Overall, we aren't really expected to see crazy strong damaging wind gusts associated with the storms that we may see today. However, we could see the possibility of some isolated weak damaging wind gusts with some of these storms. And overall, again, they shouldn't be too strong. We should see damaging wind gusts that are going to be probably around to potentially upwards of 20 miles per hour, which honestly isn't too bad, but it may blow around some loose and unsecured objects. But overall, shouldn't really be too bad or too worrying as far as damaging winds. Before I end the video and let you all free, I do want to talk about the GoFundMe for Project Gladiator really quickly. The link to the GoFundMe is in the description. Basically, for the purpose of Project Gladiator, Project Gladiator is for the main purpose of decking out a Jeep Gladiator to become an absolutely insanely powerful storm chasing monster that will collect data from some of the strongest tornadoes. I'm talking EF5, potentially even stronger, some of the strongest EF5 tornadoes, as long as there's not a lot of debris that's going to just tear apart the vehicle. It may even be potentially stronger than the TIV2 when it is completed. So if you do want to fund for the cause, the link to the GoFundMe is in the description. I hope to see you guys out in the field. Now that I've told you the weather, please get down to the description and check out the socials for Project Gladiator and join the Discord for any updates on Project Gladiator. If you live in any of the areas that I covered for today, please stay weather alert for the time being. Two other channels that I highly suggest you check out are One Nation Weather and Weather Watcher. The links to their channels will be in the description. They make amazing weather content. Weather Watcher even does weather for Europe if you are interested in that. If you notice anything might have been wrong with this forecast, or you'd like to make a suggestion or ask a question, please leave a comment. I do read them, and hopefully I'll be able to see you guys tomorrow with another forecast.